Hi, I'm Dr. Shiloh.
And I'm Dr. Scott.
And this is LA Not So Confidential, the forensic psychology and true crime podcast.
Each week, we explore the intersection of psychology, the criminal justice system, and entertainment.
Today, our episode is on the forensic psych topic of false victimization. Hey, guys.
We're back. I'm sort of back.
Yeah, Scott is back physically.
I'm back physically.
Barely.
I'm still jet lagged. I'm on London time, right?
Yeah, I didn't do the app routine on the way back. There's a really awesome app, you guys, called Time Shifter. If you ever go abroad, worked like a dream over there. But I was like, it's fine. I'm going home and I have 4 days off afterwards. And yeah, 4 days out, I feel like I'm just getting back into the swing of things. And Dr. Scott just got back. So
that means it'll take me about 3 months, right?
Oh God, don't say that. But it was worth it. So worth it. It was great.
Absolutely.
So, did you miss us?
Because we missed you. We got off our regular schedule and we miss our listeners, right?
We did. And we will have new episodes for you this month. I had like regular episodes, but we were so delighted to be able to get the audio from our presentation that we'll have that for you first today. Buys us a little bit of time too as we're getting back on our feet here. But again, CrimeCon UK did not disappoint.
No, absolutely did not. It was amazing as always. Just a bunch of things that were, I mean, we had a blast last time, right? But the improvements on facility and organization just took it to the next level, I thought.
Yeah, the venue was really, really great. I think they'll be back there again next year. And I think next year is going to go back to being in June. I think I've already seen some of the information that's out. But it was just so great to do what we always do when we go to these things, which is talk to people. I mean, there's, our friends that we know and miss, which, is so awesome to see Sarah and Kate and Sherri and Bob and Allie, which got me so excited for the Berkshires. Like, I cannot wait to hang out with our people there again. And then, of course, everyone that came by our table and came to our talk.
Yeah, so many cool people that we always get a chance to meet really cool people when we do these live things. That's always a great thing. But I didn't know that we were having people coming from the U.S.
I know.
Which was very cool.
Yeah, 2 of our Patreon members, Donna and Tiffany, you guys, thank you so much for making it, for letting this be your excuse to get over to Europe during this time. And then, of course, Tiffany, she was there with her friend Michaela. They're both flight attendants. I told them I was about ready to just start a new career and become a flight attendant. They were like, okay, we'll fill out your application for you. So Southwest, stand by. You might get an application.
Well, they also were probably giving us the best, most well-adjusted view of it as well, because they're taking advantage of the travel options that you have when you have that job, which I thought was really cool. Because Michaela was there for a marathon, right?
Yeah. She was
so that was very cool to combine those things. But then we had all these other really cool people that got to meet. Kat, who has a PhD in linguistic forensics, and I think she was from Germany.
Yeah,
I think, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Winnie. So great to meet her. And then, of course, the sisters, Becca and Rachel.
The twins, non-twins.
Cool. The non-twins that we thought were twins. We got to spend a lot of time with them last year at Bike Shed. So this year we got to hang out with them at the table. Jade and Carl, who had come back because they enjoyed the Incel presentation from last year. That was very cool. And then we also got to have a really great conversation with Aimee.
Oh, Amy's
really,
great.
Really great conversation. It's so funny. We end up having these really cool connections with people regarding this genre and questions and, shared interests. But then, we always end up finding out something else about our listeners, which is so cool. And Aimee shared something so personal and completely appropriate, but which I thought was so cool, was talking about the relationships that she had with her grandmother. Like, she was extremely, extremely close with her grandmother who passed away. And she wanted something to remember her grandmother. And I always noticed jewelry. And I immediately zeroed in on this beautiful teardrop necklace. It was like a sterling silver teardrop around her neck. And as she explained what it was, the funeral home where her grandmother was serviced, they put her grandmother's fingerprint on a pendant for her.
Yeah, it's really
How
neat.
cool and beautiful was that? I thought that was like the most wonderful remembrance and honoring of someone you really care about. I thought
Yeah,
that was really cool.
that's a great example of just these conversations we have with people. Of course, you notice the jewelry and then you see a fingerprint and you're like, "Oh, well, it's CrimeCon." Like, that's like their logo. How on brand is she? And then we start talking about the story and we were like, "Oh my god, places do that. That is so cool." And then she followed up with us and was like, "Here's the service that's offered," after we had left. And it's just moments like that that are so awesome, and sitting and talking to people that were catching up with them, had started. Oh my, I'm so sad that I forgot her name, but the one listener who has started a new job in a prison since we saw her last, and we're like catching up with her about it. And
Yeah.
asking, it's just so cool to kind of have these continued conversations a year and a half later with folks. But it's special, still one of our favorite events to do, absolutely. So I
Yeah.
I hope it goes strong totally for the future.
Yeah, I do too. It also, we love the idea behind it. We love the ethics involved in their conversations regarding true crime. All the presentations that was able to attend, again, top notch, really victim centric. They did have their handful of professionals.
Mhm.
Chris Hansen from To Catch a Predator was there with a very, very thoughtful conversation between himself and Bob Motta that I thought was really,
Right.
really a great presentation. But it was just one of many.
Yes.
And on a practical level, it's so funny because, we get these promos that we read regularly that come along with, hey, you're going to show up at our conference. Here's what we would like you to drop into your feed. And like the whole thing, remember us talking for the last few months about the free flowing coffee, tea, and biscuits. And it really was kind of amazing. Like it felt like this combination of the perfect size conference, and yet over here is a self-serve snack bar that just felt like you were, oh, well, let me run to the kitchen and grab something
Right.
before
Yeah.
I go into this next presentation. It was really great. Y'all, it's for real. And the hotel was amazing. It was right by a tube stop. Literally
Mhm.
got off my flight, took the Elizabeth line, which was a handful of dollars, very cheap, and you walk out and you're at your hotel. That
Yeah.
was so cool. And then it was also, we had this, many of the our connection events were at this pub restaurant called the Alice.
Right.
So great, like just rustic enough for it to feel relaxed and not like so shishi upscale. It was great.
Yeah, everything about
I
it
can't say
was.
enough good things about it.
Yeah, it was organized very, very well. So, I mean, if you guys are ever thinking about going in the future, just like last year, I mean, I guess we can't say enough about it. So, but yeah, we made the most of our time in London, and I went to Amsterdam and you went to Prague. And how was Prague?
Prague was incredibly beautiful. It was perfect weather, and I got to see a lot. Unfortunately, my husband is working on a movie. That's the way the industry works, and so he was not able to travel with me. And I realized that I'm okay alone for a couple of days,
Yeah, yeah.
and then it's not as much fun not being able to share it
Sounds
with
good on the front
someone.
end, huh?
Yeah, but it was incredibly beautiful city, very friendly, helpful people, very, very inexpensive. Like you can have a really nice vacation for actually very little money.
Yeah.
Incredible public transportation, and you just feel like you're walking through a movie set. Like
Oh,
everywhere
yeah.
you turn around in Old Town is unbelievable classic medieval architecture. I was able to go through a really, really amazing UNESCO site, which was the Jewish cemetery, where you're seeing graves from 1450.
It was
Um,
incredible. That place is
yeah,
stunning.
and that's just one of many things to see. So yeah, highly recommend Prague. That was great.
Yeah, I think the highlight of our trip was we went and saw Stranger Things in the West
Oh
End,
yeah,
and first time we'd done a play over there. The Phoenix Theater is gorgeous. It's from the 30s, and the production was great. It's coming to Broadway next year. So be in LA, what, in a couple years after that,
yeah.
probably, but very, very cool experience. So yeah, we made the most of it. Thank you guys so much for giving us, the space to do this and take some time and give you some other things in the feed. And we do have travel again this month, but for the meantime, we're going to be back with some new stuff for you because October is a fairly long month. We have 3 Wednesdays that we'll be dropping things for you. So today we're bringing you the audio from CrimeCon UK. It's a presentation that Dr. Scott and I have given a few times in front of a few different audiences now, and you've probably
Right.
heard us talk about it here or on Behind the Couch or on Shrink Wrap if you're a Patreon member. And it's kind of like a LA Not So Confidential greatest hits in a way, because we have this mashup of a vintage case, we talk about personality disorders, and then we talk about high profile cases of false victimizations and kidnappings in a really cool interactive style if you're there live. So the audio does translate really well.
And you know how much we love the personality disorders, right?
Yes.
It's always fun and interesting to present on those. And as we've said, this is another super busy month for us. So here is the plan for the rest of October. In 2 weeks, our listeners are going to have a brand new full episode. And then at the end of the month, we're going to do a fun mini episode review for you guys on the diagnosis of hybristophilia. And we're going to relate the material to the new Joker film, Folie à Deux. Do you think we'll make the cut, Dr. Shiloh?
Oh, well, it's your husband that worked on the movie, so you tell me. We're not allowed to say anything, right?
Not yet, no.
Okay, okay. Just go see the film before we spoil the film for you during our talk, but keep your eyes very, very open during the
Yes.
movie. But wait, there's more. So there's still time to make your plans and join us at the Berkshire Podcast Festival, which is happening October 20th and 21st in gorgeous North Adams, Massachusetts. We're going to be teaming up with Dr. Megan from Women in Crime for an all new, super light and fun presentation. We cannot wait to do this.
And it's not too late. I mean, we know that travel might be a bit more expensive if you've had to wait this long, so we get it. But we have a new promo code for anybody who's thinking about booking this late in the game. And you can get 20% off tickets with the code Fall Into the Sound at www.berkshirepodcastfestival.com. Again, Fall Into the Sound at www.berkshirepodcastfestival.com. This autumn, fall into the sounds of your favorite podcasters at the Berkshire Podcast Festival.
All right, everyone, enjoy this recording of our CrimeCon UK 2024 presentation on an exploration of false victimization from vintage Los Angeles to today.
So, hi, everybody. Let me get close. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Scott, and we are LA Not So Confidential. I'm here with
Dr. Shiloh. Thanks for coming, everyone. Okay, so before we get to our topic, if you go to your browser and you plug in this web address, it's going to plug you into our polling system. It might ask you for your name, and you can press skip underneath. You don't need to put your name in there or anything or register. Hopefully we only have 2 questions for polling, so I think it'll go. But I'll give you a second to do this.
And while you're doing that, for anybody that's not aware of who we are LA Not So Confidential. Shiloh and I have been best friends for years. I still don't understand why she picked up this stray dog of an individual to be her friend, but I'm very lucky that it happened. We both did our internships together after graduating with our doctorates in forensic psychology. We are now working forensic psychologists in Southern California. We both work with the same law enforcement agency, but in different capacities. Former cop who is now a law enforcement psychologist. I'm a former entertainment executive. I now work with detectives in the field doing emergency work. So I went from working for crazy people to working with crazy people. That was my transition.
All right. So if you listen to our podcast, you know that occasionally we like to go back in time and cover vintage cases because we do work with law enforcement in Los Angeles. The ironic thing about our podcast is we don't talk about current Los Angeles cases. We have to go back to when people are now dead that were associated with those cases. But we also just love old Los Angeles history. So if we were in Los Angeles, in downtown Los Angeles proper right now,
and we headed a little bit north of the city where a couple of major streets come together, you would see this really strange looking building that still stands today that I've driven by a million times and really hadn't given it a thought until we covered this story. So this is the Angelus Temple that was run by Sister Aimee Semple McPherson in the 20s and 30s. And Dr. Scott's going to tell us a little bit about that period and who she was.
So the 1920s and 1930s in Los Angeles was really a fascinating time because it was an exponential explosion in population and growth, and everybody in the country was moving west because there were just an incredible opportunity. So along with the population expansion came a lot of people that were seeking spiritual development. So some of those were traditional religions or Christian denominations, but there was also a movement called the New Thought movement, which is sort of what we would consider New Agey in a way. And a lot of it was based in Christian theology, but it was really a lot like The Secret that came around about 20 years ago, which was you can manifest your worldly desires through prayer and through Christian doctrine. And it emphasized really the power of the mind and the power of positive thinking. So along with the development of those religions, the most charming and outgoing and gregarious of personalities were usually the most successful ministers in this area. So this is Sister Aimee Semple McPherson. This is at the height of her career. She started out as a missionary when she was just a teenager. At age 18, she went to Asia with her preacher husband, who was only a couple of years older than her. He quickly contracted malaria, died, left her a widowed mother of one as a teen, and she came back to America to live with his family in the Midwest. She quickly realized that living in the Midwest in 1920s was not her jam. There was not a lot going on. She was a very big personality, so she got a family car, painted her name on the side of it with a lot of Christian symbology, and she headed west with her child and a friend. And she ended up opening and very quickly became very popular, and through the power of the newest technology of the time, which was radio. And radio was explosive at this time because there were relay stations across the country that allowed the coasts to now communicate with each other, and even sometimes from overseas. So she was so charming and so ebullient in her faith that she quickly rose to prominence, raised a lot of money, and was able to build what she called the Foursquare Church. And this was the temple of the Foursquare Church, which is now known as the Angelus Temple, is what she's standing in front of. Is anyone here from the UK? Do you know who Joel Osteen is? Have you ever heard of this? I'm so glad you haven't. He's a very powerful American evangelical minister, and he's always got this creepy smile plastered on his face. He is very charming. He's very, very charming. His church is very homophobic. It's very, very, very conservative, and he practices a form of what we call prosperity gospel, which is sort of what Aimee Semple McPherson taught as well, is that if you're a good enough Christian and you just believe hard enough, then all the riches of heaven will be delivered to you in this earthly form.
Just see if that's going to go. That's the video. There we go. It doesn't have any audio. So at the height of her popularity, I mean, she was really one of the biggest celebrities across the country because of radio. May 18th, 1926, she and her secretary go to Venice Beach just for a day at the beach. And Sister Aimee goes for a swim, and according to her secretary, just seemingly disappears. So you can imagine if one of the biggest celebrities in any given country goes missing and just disappears, what that would be like in terms of a complete media circus. The search and rescue effort was absolutely massive. 2 people died looking for her, divers. There were candlelight vigils held by her parishioners at the beach day and night for days and days and days, to where finally her mother, who was basically her business partner and ran the church and really ran much of her life, put tremendous pressure on Sister Aimee, who was performing multiple times a day at this church, as well as trying to raise her daughter, as well as feeding underprivileged populations in Los Angeles, really concentrating on the Hispanic community that was already in Los Angeles before white people were in Los Angeles, but now they were unfortunately underprivileged. She was focusing on, really handing out meals and clothing to them. She was under tremendous pressure, but her mother finally went to the church and said, Aimee has left us. So they assumed that she was presumed dead because they could not find her. As well as the media circus, we then started having a ton of ransom notes start coming in with people saying that they were holding her for ransom. There were notes written by people who claimed to be groups. They called themselves the Revengers, the Avengers. There was a blind attorney that came forward that said he was in communication with the kidnappers. None of this ever panned out. They were just kind of false leads, people kind of coming out of the woodwork. Of course, as you can imagine, when a celebrity, has a story this big. So 5 weeks later, she comes crawling out of the Mexican desert on the Mexico side of the border, collapses in this couple's front yard. She is maybe 87 pounds. She has cactus needles in her feet. She is sunburned. She has blistered toes. And she says that she escaped kidnappers who had taken her to Mexico. And what had happened is, according to Sister Aimee, she was on the beach. A young couple came up to her, said, our baby is really sick. Can you come pray for her? She's in the car. Aimee goes and follows them to the back of the car, looks in the car, and they chloroform her and take her off and kidnap her. So she comes forward with this story. Her mom actually didn't believe it. She had to go down to the hospital in Mexico to see her daughter for herself. And sure enough, it was Sister Aimee. But there had been some sightings of Sister Aimee up in a little town in Central California called Carmel by the Sea. Some people said that they saw a man and a woman checked into a little bungalow hotel, and she looked a lot like Sister Aimee. And there were rumors that Sister Aimee was actually having an affair with a married man who worked in finance in her church. So, there was a lot of different questions swirling around of whether or not this was actual disappearance or kidnapping for ransom. With all of that, the LADA's office put a lot of time and money and resources into this. They went up to Carmel. They fingerprinted this entire bungalow looking for any sign that Sister Aimee had been there. But through all of it, they could not find enough evidence to bring charges against her. There were weeks of inquiries, weeks of testimony, and at the end of it, they ended up dropping any charges against her for falsifying her disappearance and using up resources. And her life was never the same after that. She could never get out from underneath the suspicion of what had happened. And in 1944, she actually passed away from an overdose. Some people suspect that it was suicide. She had passed away from the medication that was actually not prescribed to her, but there is some accounts that she knew she was not feeling well and tried to call her doctor. And he was in surgery and couldn't get back to her soon enough, and she died. So kind of open-ended on whether, this really ended up in kind of the ultimate tragedy of her taking her life or not. But a very early case of a suspected hoax kidnapping.
So the question that we ask, and we ask you, is, was Sister Aimee the original Gone Girl? Right? Because it fits a lot of those same characteristics of the Gillian Flynn novel. She had a lot of notable risk factors that we as clinicians and law enforcement adjacent professionals tend to look at for people who engage in what you're here to listen about today, false victimization. So we're going to give you some categories, and then we're going to start drawing some parallels. We gave you a basis of story from vintage times, but it's still active today because this phenomenon continues to occur. False victimization falls basically into several categories. We have kidnappings or mysterious disappearances, like Gone Girl. And then we also have the threat or the supposed experience of violent attacks. And these can be spur-of-the-moment attacks, or they can be long, protracted buildups of attacks that would include assaults, threats, the experience of being stalked. And then we can also have the experience of hate crimes. So people who feel that they have been attacked because of their marginalized population status, whether it's race, culture, religious beliefs, and the actions that are taken against them are like ethnic slurs, racial slurs, vandalism to their property, to their persons, that type of thing.
So before we move on to our quick case study, we would like you to answer this question on your phone. What do you think are some motivations for self-victimization? And this is just plug in your own answer, a word, a phrase.
What drives them to do it? Like seems like such an impulsive thing. It seems so alien to most of us. What do you think?
All right. When someone does a response, let us know you submitted it. You submitted? All right. Okay.
Again, technology fails us. That's okay.
Am I hooked up to the Wi-Fi still on my laptop?
What did you respond with? Notoriety. Definitely some fame, because there's power in fame, right? What else? What do you... Need for attention? Absolutely. Very good. So maybe I wasn't able to take care of it in the past, but I will get my retribution now. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Especially the example with Sister Aimee was the immense pressure that she was under as a young woman. This is just too much. I need to escape. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll see that as one of the main drivers. Yes, ma'am. Say it again. Oh, absolutely. Major one. And that was the one that we see mainly. We're talking primarily with female individuals in this example today, but in male populations, there are so many men that fake their deaths for insurance money, and they always get caught, thankfully. Yes, ma'am. Spot on. Absolutely. Yeah. So look at the sort of the spectrum. Yes, I'll give one last one. Yeah. I mean, and that's a perfect example in the fictional, in Gone Girl is a fictional story, is that this person is so disordered that she's taking an outlandish response to revenge, even to the point of taking her own life, which I think is the plan in that narrative. So as we can see, and thank you all for the responses. Sorry about the technology not working. But as you can see, there's a number of different ways that each individual is going to respond to a perceived threat to them. I know it doesn't sound like a threat, like I'm going to create victimhood because I'm threatened, but that usually is what the motivation is. It just emerges in different ways. And some of them are subtle, most of them are very wild, and we'll see that there's one commonality, is that all of these claims of victimization are much more exaggerated than the situation would really allow for. Like the response, their answer usually indicates someone who is not very insightful, and we'll dig into that a little bit more.
I'm so disappointed because this is the biggest word cloud I've ever seen in any of our presentations. Like the whole screen is covered with your answers. So apologies that is... It's on the screen back there, but not up here. So moving on, obviously, folks are quite familiar with the Sherri Papini story. Anyone not?
Yeah. Does anyone not know Sherri Papini?
Okay.
Wow, that's cool. Okay.
Good.
So again, it's across the pond, but this was on the West Coast. This is a major case for a number of reasons.
So Sherri was, kind of had a reputation as being a super mom. In 2016, she's married, 2 little kiddos. She went for a jog and seemingly disappeared. I feel like that should be the name of this.
Seemingly disappeared.
Yeah, topic today. She was reported missing by her husband, Keith, which he came home and when she didn't pick up the kids from daycare and tracked her phone and saw her phone by the side of the road with her AirPods, with some hair tangled in the cord down on the ground, neatly laid there. But he reported her missing, and of course everyone thought, well, the husband did it. Of course, clearly he, manufactured all of this. But her disappearance sparked a major, major search effort as well. After 3 weeks of her being gone with no trace, she shows up about 150 miles away from her home. Also, very, very thin, beaten and bruised, shackled. She was branded with actually, I don't know if it's been released of what she has been branded with, either some wording or symbol. And she said that she was kidnapped at gunpoint by 2 Hispanic women and forced into a van, and that she was held for a number of days while beaten as well. So her story got very widespread coverage, as you can imagine. Beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed woman, tale as old as time, right, of what we're paying attention to in the media. But a lot of questions rose about the veracity of her story after just really nothing panned out. There were a lot of problematic issues with how they were looking into people that were potentially suspects or looking for suspects, and kind of the divisiveness it created with the Hispanic community, because she was saying that these were 2 Hispanic women who had done this, and probably, completely made up. So there was a lot of lack of physical evidence, but the law enforcement officers did take DNA swabs, and through familial genealogy were able to trace back some of the DNA on her clothing to some guy that lived in Southern California. She was more northern, Central California. That ended up being an old boyfriend of hers. And he eventually, after being contacted by law enforcement, said, yep, she had told me that her husband was being quite abusive to her, arranged that she wanted to get away from him, and I helped her, and she came and she stayed with me. And towards the end, when she wanted to go home, when she started missing her kids, I helped her beat herself up with a hockey stick and some other means of making it look like that she was kidnapped and beaten and held. So 5 years after Sherri had gone missing, she was actually arrested and charged with making false statements to a federal officer, and then some mail fraud because she and her husband had collected some victim funding for her situation, and she ended up doing 18 months in jail. There's a fairly new documentary out on Hulu that is incredibly one-sided, really just from the husband's perspective and painting Sherri as a monster. It will be really interesting to see if something else comes out that's a little bit more meaty, that,
can help us understand it.
Help us understand that how someone would sort of get to this level if, it sounds like she did indeed plan all of this. I think it would just be more helpful. It's just more helpful to the true crime community to get to understand it. But it'll be interesting to see if Sherri ever speaks out to counter her husband's side.
And very interesting, guess what movie came out 2 years before her disappearance? Gone Girl. I mean, down to the fact that her hair was chopped up. There were just so many similarities between her experience and the movie. So then let's talk about the motivation. So we talk about the different criminal behaviors that can result as a matter from emerging from these phenomenon. But in general, the behaviors can be broken down into either an emotional or a material need attempting to be met. And the material is very easy, right? Because the material, as you were saying, is insurance money. Is there some sort of tangible secondary gain that comes from getting money, getting power in order to get money? And that is certainly an emotional process in itself. But then there are others that are purely emotionally driven, which are really more about focus of attention on the self. And it doesn't mean, even though it's the same need, it's driven by different aspects of the personality. We can get something, but it came from a different road, right? The same thing can come from different roads. So one of the major, or two of the major bifurcations here are either to gain attention or to avoid consequences, right? And one of the super important things to remember here is the amount of validation that can come from the attention that you get. When you have the spotlight of public attention, public sympathy, public compassion, it can be very validating for people, even if it's not coming from a true place. The big important thing here, as I said earlier, is that the efforts to meet the need of validation are wildly disparate from the amount of energy that goes into creating the phenomenon. Like all the planning that has to go into disappearing or creating this false experience is really like exponentially larger than like you got into a fight with someone or you feeling like you're not getting enough attention from your spouse. It's just really, really unbalanced. One of the things that's very common in the examples that we're going to be using later on, because we've got several that we'll kind of rapid fire give to you, is that none of these people really thought their plans through at all. Like they may have thought, oh, I need to starve myself for a couple of weeks, so I'm underweight. I need to chop my hair. I need to beat myself up. I need to have some wounds. But those are the immediate plans rather than long-term plans about how they're going to address this. So sympathy and attention can be really validating for people. Many of them really respond very strongly to knowing that there are prayer vigils, that there are candlelight services, that there are GoFundMes being raised for them.
It almost has a little bit of a Munchausen by proxy vibe to it.
Yeah.
You know, like those other sort of the emotional benefits.
Exactly. And then alibi. Like an alibi is literally the most common motivation to get out of the responsibility of something, right? I couldn't possibly have been guilty for that over there because I was over here. I was kidnapped. I couldn't have possibly done this over here. And then also there are some times that are maybe, if we were going to give a little wiggle room to a possible positive benefit, is the attention to a cause. And I think one of our responders just recently was saying this, is that if someone feels very strongly like there is an injustice to my marginalized community, I need to do something personally to bring attention to this, so I'm going to wound myself or I'm going to feign an attack so that there's more attention brought to me and whatever cause I believe in.
All right, so before we get into psychological disorders that could be responsible here, I just want to kind of look at like what takes a seemingly normal person, what sort of situation are they in, and what does that roadmap look like a little bit. Generally, what we're seeing with these cases is you have someone, for whatever reason or motivation that we just named, is in a place of desperation to where they just don't feel like there's any other option, whether or not that's true. Almost similar like when we see individuals who are suffering with suicidal ideation, right? They have that as an option on the table where other folks may not ever think that. These individuals are really starting to think up these big, elaborate plans out of desperation. And from that, they end up engaging in quite impulsive behavior because of their lack of coping skills and their lack of being able to emotionally regulate, to be able to bring themselves back down and then say, okay, how can I think through this and problem solve? So they're sort of jumping to these big, wild issues because of this series of events. And as Dr. Scott said, they're not thinking these through really long term. They're kind of only seeing, you know, what the end game is as far as like, how do I make this plan fall through? So they're not really savvy in terms of their meticulous planning all the way through necessarily. And we haven't found this in the research, but I think just from the cases we've looked at anecdotally, women tend to fake their disappearances and then kind of pop up again when they've had their time off and they've had their their time alone, if you will. And then we find with men, they tend to fake their deaths and plan on just like leaving for good. So it would be interesting to see.
Or just moving a town over and having another family.
Well, there's
like
that
there's
too.
Case after.
That's a different part of our Venn diagram of double lives.
Right.
But it's really interesting. You can kind of start to look at those nuances where I could see if you're not planning it fully through, then you do kind of got to pop up and reappear at some point and have a story to tell behind that.
Here we go. Does anyone recognize this wonderful actor, very, very talented actor, really screwed his life up, unfortunately. And he's a combination of factors. His name is Jussie Smollett. He's in a family of actors. He has several siblings, all very talented people. He was on a wonderful hit show called Empire. And in 2019, he alleged that in the middle of winter, outside a Chicago bar, he had been approached by two white individuals who started hurling racial epithets at him. They threw acid on his face, they hung a noose around his neck, and they threatened his life, as well as making many homophobic slurs because he's been out and openly gay for most of his life. The story fell apart very, very quickly. Again, a really strong example of he really did not think this through at all. And the people that he had hired to attack him were immigrants themselves, and they caved very quickly. I mean, they had been also paid like a couple of $100s. It wasn't very much at all. I'm not advocating to pay more if you're planning on this. That's not my motivation here. I'm just giving an illustration. And what the motivation here was for money. He was on a hit show, but hit shows are very expensive to produce. And if you're not in the majority of A storylines, that means you're relegated to second or third tier, and you don't make as much money. He believed me, he was making a lot of money. But he was hoping that this experience he would be able to use in bargaining the next time his contract came around. And that didn't happen. They were like, nope, you're out of here. We don't need this kind of controversy on our show. So unfortunately, I mean, he's starting to work again. It's taken a while for him to reestablish, but it's really sad because he's quite a talented young man. Again, was that really necessary to go to that length to advocate for more money or better storylines?
They don't give that advice in the entertainment industry.
They don't.
To work your contracts like
No.
that. Okay, so if this worked, but I don't think it's going to, we're just curious. So what do you think is the major risk factor to self-victimization? Who thinks it's criminality, some sort of criminal thinking, having a criminal background, and this is just one more thing in their repertoire that they're leaning on? Anyone? Maybe? Okay. How about mental illness? Anyone? Okay. What about maybe something else that we haven't covered?
What are some ideas from the something else people? What do you think?
Circumstance.
That's really a great observation, because it goes back to Dr. Shiloh's earlier point of a lack of coping skills, or coping skills that are not adequate to the current challenges that you're experiencing. That's great. What are some other ones? Yes. Right. I mean, again, with the example of Sherri Papini, I am fully my clinical opinion in many of these cases, especially, you saw that beautiful photo. Like, everything now that is a major life event, including funerals, has to become a social media exercise, right? I mean, yes, there were other lovely wedding photos. We chose that one because I thought it was very representative of, you're seeing the back of her husband's head, and you're seeing her beautiful blonde blue eyes, because she needed to be the center of attention for that photo, right? So yes, there were other pictures that showed his face, but we thought that was a good illustration.
I also, as we move forward into looking at personality disorders here, and, majority here raise their hand in terms of thinking about mental illness. If you listen to our show, you know that we certainly preach that mental illness is way more stigmatized in true crime and looking at criminality than it should be. And we're going to have some caveats at the end of the diagnoses we're going to talk about, that we're not talking about causation here in terms of this person with this diagnosis is doing this thing. Again, it's about looking backwards, right? So like, if we ever do hear from Sherri Papini, interesting to note if she ever comes forward with what a diagnosis is, and then how has that played a role in her life going backwards from the kidnapping? Where else did we see it? But that doesn't have to always be the case. Like, with the information that we have about Sister Aimee, otherwise, I don't think there's something that we could have said was a personality disorder that impacted her life negatively leading up to that. It could have literally just been circumstance, the pressure on her at that time. She needed a timeout. She needed to get away. And how are you going to do that when you have a congregation that's, completely dependent on you. So this was what she thought of.
Also, for anyone that's interested, there's a wonderful show called Penny Dreadful. Was anybody familiar with Penny Dreadful? Wonderful show, only a couple of seasons. They tried to reboot it, Penny Dreadful, City of Angels, and there's a fictionalized version of Aimee Semple McPherson that shows the immense pressure that she was put under by her mom because of the amount of money they were making, because she was the one that was driving all the income.
Also in the Perry Mason recent episodes they did, she was in that.
So we hear a lot about personality disorders, and our understanding within the clinical world of psychology, we have a better understanding of personality disorders than we really ever have. You know, we've got a big book called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual because God knows we just love to put labels on people, right? And we have an evolved understanding because we used to think that personality disorders were always born out of trauma, that it was always about adverse childhood experiences. And what we know now, because we have wonderful brain scans, we have incredible blood tests, we understand that personality disorders are a combination of nature and nurture. So personality disorders, though, are chronic patterns of thoughts and feelings, behaviors that deviate significantly from cultural expectations. So what might be acceptable in one culture is not acceptable in another culture, but if it's not acceptable in both of those cultures, it may have to do with a disorder. The underlying cause is a combination of genetic and environmental factors, nature and nurture. We do know that you can have all the genetic predisposition for a personality disorder, but if you aren't triggered by certain events, it's more likely that you will not have those problems. However, if you have the predisposition and you have adverse childhood experiences or trauma, it can trigger them. And then also, they're pervasive. That means they last a long time. They are inflexible. They become a part of the person's functioning. It sort of becomes part of your programming. And most importantly, it does cause distress in the life. And that most of the people that I've worked with personality disorders are very aware that there's something wrong with them. But they're also dually feeling that if the world would just get right, my life would be a lot easier. So it's very hard for them. I know something's wrong with me, but it's very difficult for them to take responsibility for that. So I got a little graphic here. I love Venn diagrams, which is here we're using an outdated model. For those of you that are psychologists or mental health clinicians or students, I apologize because I'm still talking cluster language, and we're not supposed to say clusters anymore because we understand that personality disorders basically are like this big cauldron, this big soup of human development, right? But for today's purposes, it's just easier to describe in this way. We have them in clusters. And here over in cluster C, those are the ones that are anxious and fearful. So they're avoidant, or they have overly dependent, or they have obsessive compulsive aspects to them. Those rarely have anything to do with crime. Up here in cluster A, we have odd, bizarre, and eccentric behaviors. I mean, when I was growing up in rural Alabama back in the 60s and 70s, it was like you always had a weird neighbor, right? Like, oh, Miss Smith likes to talk to Jesus while she plays the piano late at night, right? You know, so that was just who she was. Now, unfortunately, we're at a point where we just put labels on people, and we aren't quite so accepting of people that are divergent in their ways. And then we have cluster B, and of course, cluster B are the ones that are fun. Because we make movies about them because they're so dramatic and their actions and behaviors are really quite alien to us. So odd, bizarre, dramatic, erratic. We can knock out anxious and fearful. Those are rarely involved in violent crimes. We can do the same thing with with cluster A, except keep your eye on schizotypal because that plays a rare but very interesting role at times. But boy, down here, cluster B. We've got antisocial personality disorder, very structural and personality-wise, very little empathy, reactivity as far as understanding mirror neurons and compassion for other people, borderline personality, histrionic, narcissistic. And now we want to give you a little description. Oh, I'm going backwards. My apologies. Boom. Here we go.
Keep the Alabama stories to a minimum because we have like 9 minutes.
I know.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, so with borderline, you're going to see a lot of pervasive instability in terms of mood, in terms of interpersonal relationships with other people, as well as their self-image and their behavior. And then folks with this disorder really feel emotions very raw, whether it's happy or whether it's sad or anything in between. They're going to feel them very intensely, and they might engage in some self-harm behavior. Here, I'll take that. But the bottom line is, with these individuals with these attention-seeking type behaviors, they are more likely to be involved in criminal activity where there's an element of impulsivity and emotional dysregulation. So a little bit of what we've talked about already that we see with people who fake their own victimizations. And then we have histrionic personality disorder, so their emotions...
Kind of like this bright fluorescent sweater that you're wearing, a need for attention.
To be fair, I thought we were presenting yesterday, and I wore my presentation clothes yesterday and didn't pay attention to the schedule. So in terms of emotions, very dramatic, exaggerated, but shifting pretty rapidly. You can imagine that would be really hard to be around somebody like this and to be interpersonally entwined with somebody like this. That is just, it would be really confusing, but also really exhausting. Again, the attention seeking, and they might even use sex to try and keep people, sex and provocative behavior to keep people sort of looped into them because of their fear of abandonment and rejection. But generally, when they are engaged in criminal behavior, there tends to be a lot of manipulation, attention seeking, and deceit used.
So narcissistic personality disorder, a lot of grandiosity, a lot of entitlement, a lot of very much feeling special. Yes, there is brain structure that supports this, but a lot of it comes from family influence. One of our most powerful and famous former presidents, we would say, a lot of politicians will meet the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. However, our former president really, really kind of is a very strong example of that. Narcissists can do very well. They can function very well as they can partner with people who tend to have more passive personalities, and they can do well. Very interesting, because we don't have any stats that link narcissistic personality disorder to criminal behavior unless it is in conjunction with aspects of antisocial personality disorder, and that is not a good mix, not a good mix at all. Then we go on to antisocial personality disorder. The key note here is this disregard or the violation of rights of others. So it's just the other really doesn't exist. I'm the one who's the most important. My needs come first. You're an extension of my needs, and that's it. Irresponsible, impulsive, lying, aggressive, manipulative, a real lack of remorse. And this personality disorder is much more associated with criminality, including theft, assault, substance abuse, and there's a higher risk of engaging in criminal behaviors compared to the general population. Now, that being said, CEOs do very well if they're antisocial, because they'll take risks that the general population will not take. So if you are a smart antisocial, you end up being a Fortune 500 CEO. If you're not smart, you end up in jail. So schizotypal disorder, I brought this one in because it's one of the ones that doesn't exist, and that's an AI generation of British comic and writer Alan Moore. I love him. But they tend to be more odd and eccentric, have very poor social skills, increased engagement with law enforcement because their behavior is erratic. Not that they're dangerous, but they tend to interact more or have more incidents that involve law enforcement. They may believe that they are victims of crime, even though they're not psychotic. They don't hear voices, they don't see things, but they can be very paranoid, which means they'll generate a lot of calls to police departments.
And then we just have psychopathy up here because, of course, this is not a diagnosis, but it's antisocial personality disorder on steroids, like I always say. Wide range of behaviors, as we call it, criminal variety in their background, and tendency towards violence and then recidivism, committing future crimes. Okay, so we are just quickly going to talk about Carly Russell, which is probably one of the most recent in the United States cases where she actually did admit fault. Thank you, Carly. We appreciate that. Okay, so in these 3 minutes, we are going to talk about Carly Russell. So in 2023, she's a nursing student. She was also working for the U.S. Postal Service, and she disappeared for 49 hours from her home. Nope. Can you click on the audio, please? We're just going to hear the 911 call that she made.
Where's your emergency?
Hi, I am on Interstate 459, and there is a kid just walking by themselves.
Oh, hold on. Where on 459 are you?
I'm right next to the exit 10 by the Hoover Met, like to get off by the Hoover Met.
Okay, so you're before that exit?
Yes.
Okay, and were you headed southbound or northbound? Like toward Tuscaloosa or toward 280?
Towards Tuscaloosa.
Okay, and was the child on the left or right side?
On the right side.
Were they walking northbound or southbound?
They're walking towards Tuscaloosa.
Walking southbound? Or how old did they look?
Like a toddler, like maybe like 3 or 4.
Did you pull over with
that's
them?
good. You can stop it there. So Carly essentially calls 911 and says there's a toddler walking around this highway by themselves. You need to send someone out. So she gives a good description. She hangs up with 911. She then calls a family member. And as she's on the phone with a family member, there's sort of an open line. The family member can hear a struggle. And when police arrive at the location, Carly's car is there. Her purse is there. They find her wig, some other belongings, but Carly is gone. So the idea was that it looked like a ruse that, someone was maybe using a child to then lure her to be a good Samaritan and then kidnapped her. So she did end up turning up 49 hours later. She did at first say that she was indeed kidnapped. But she came forward and admitted her wrongdoing. I just want to read her statement. If you can just click. This went viral on TikTok. I just wanted to show that. But she said, I made a grave mistake while trying to fight through various emotional issues and stress. I absolutely regret my decision, and in hindsight, wish I had cried for help in a totally different manner. My prayer is that I will be extended grace and be given the opportunity to redeem who I truly am and restore the positively esteemed character that I have worked so hard to obtain in 25 years of my life prior to this incident. And it goes on to really, she speaks very candidly. She was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, but they suspended that, had her pay a fine, and then ordered mental health counseling. So seems like pretty appropriate for what was going on.
Also, another example of someone, she is a very accomplished young woman.
Right.
A very educated, great job, but she was living a very challenging life, going to school, working. So another example of, did this happen because of the pressures that were under her?
We're done.
Okay.
So let's just...
If you're interested in these names, these are other very famous cases out of Canada. Cindy James, please look it up. It's fascinating. Ryan Lochte, American Olympic, not the sharpest knife in the drawer, made up a huge lie in South America to cover him being drunk and vandalizing. Tawana Brawley, big case that caused a huge racial divide in the U.S., but then we later found out she made an excuse about being kidnapped because she was being abused by her stepdad. Ashley Todd was a worker for the McCain presidential campaign. Said she was attacked by a black person, but then she wrote the B on her face in a mirror, so she had it backwards. She finally confessed. This one, Bethany Storrow, just amazes me. I mean, I'm confounded today. She threw acid on her own face. And then made it racial. She said that a black woman had attacked her at a subway stop. Completely inappropriate. And later, admitted to having mental health struggles. But then the really rough one is Alex Murdaugh, who is a horrific family murderer and financial means covering up all the mess he had made, but just thought that the way to fix it was to kill his family members and then have a fake assassination attempt.
So please come by our table. We have some magnets because when we do this for law enforcement, we say, please just do your job like you're going to end up on a Netflix docuseries one day. That's all we ask. And I think this docuseries covered that because this did not turn out to be a hoax, even though it was the most outlandish story you've ever heard.
Felt like a hoax, wasn't one.
And if the original investigators had done their job like they were going to be on a Netflix documentary, hopefully they would have done it better. Thank goodness for the second investigator who put the whole story together. She's awesome. But when we do present to law enforcement, we do show them this slide. And we have magnets and stickers that say this. So if you want to put it up in your workplace, we have it for you. Other than that, we'll put our QR code up here. Thank you. We also want to thank this gentleman for his artwork. And our QR code is the last one. Thank you so much. Sorry that was rushed. We need to get this down next year or something.
Thank you.
We sincerely thank you for spending some time with us today. LA Not So Confidential is part of the Crawlspace Media Network. Each episode is hosted, produced, and written by Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh. Our post-production editing and sweetening magic is handled by the multi-talented Jason Usry of Ear Cult Productions.
Our theme music, entitled Cool Vibes Film Noir, is composed and performed by the talented Kevin MacLeod. He graciously allows us to use his music via a Creative Commons Attribution license. Please check out all of Kevin's amazing work on YouTube.
All of the resources for each episode can be found on our website at la-not-so-confidential.com. You can find us on Instagram at LA Not So Podcast, on X at LA Not So Pod, and on Facebook at LA Not So Confidential. Media inquiries and bookings are scheduled at alienistentertainment@gmail.com.
Once a month, we go live on YouTube on Saturday afternoon. So pay attention to our social media announcements to join our interactive broadcast entitled Behind the Couch, where we interview guests on a number of psych, criminal justice, and true crime topics.
And lastly, we'd be honored if you joined our Patreon at patreon.com/LA Not So Podcast. With a subscription, you get an ad-free listening experience, additional content, host interaction, and you'll be the first to know about upcoming live events, social gatherings, and super cool swag.
Thanks for listening, and join us next time on LA
Not So
Confidential.